A dream. I saw a dream. A dream that wouldn't end. Over and over again, I reread and replied to every single comment. But before I knew it, I had lost count. I'd replied over 100 million times. And yet, there was still a sentiment many people had. Where the fuck is Bizaah? Yeah, you got me, bruh. Yeah, got me. I was just playing the walking game and out kind of 4 rhythms across the blue. But hey, since it's been so long since I've uploaded, I guess you could say I
kept you waiting, huh?
Okay, cut the crap. Altercation's development is cancelled. Or at least paused for a very, 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 very long time. Now, the reason for this is quite simple. When part 2 of the Altercation series came out, I was pretty excited to make part 3 as soon as possible. And I had big plans for it, where I basically remade the entire game. I was making a new map, doing new animations, and I even recoded the entire game. But I realized at the end of it that I had double the recordings of both part 1 and 2 put together. And the end result is literally like significantly less than even part 1 had. It's an M1 combo. And the destruction was being remade too, so that's not there either. Part 3 was in shambles, bro, I'm gonna be honest. And that's because Altercations is a YouTube series. It wasn't really it was for YouTube entertainment purposes, right? So that's out the way. Addressing the second thing, there's not going to be a Toto Part 3. The guy is literally in the game now. I don't need to make it. Regardless, what am I doing now? Well, after I decided to cancel Altercations, I just started making a bunch of Sword Art Online stuff for practice. It was actually going so well that I was thinking, hey, I might just make a Sword Art Online game completely. And I started doing that. A lot of people seem to feel like it was a good idea and that it would go far, but I just had this nagging feeling in the back of my head. This wasn't the first time I'd had this idea, and I just couldn't shake off that I was making an inferior version of something I came up with a long time ago. And that's when it hit me. I had forgotten about a promise I had made a very long time ago. Oh, dramatic cut, holy hell. So, I never made a main channel video about this, but I think it's appeared in the background of some videos by accident or like, unmentioned, right? If you've been in the community a lot longer than the Altercations videos, you probably know what I'm talking about here, right? Like, I don't need to mention the name. Fuck, I'll mention the name. Rezero, guys, it's Rezero. Do you guys know what Rezero is? Holy shit. This was my pride and joy, my baby even. This game was immaculate. It was the greatest game I had ever created up until that point, and the idea was so fresh, so new, and totally not just Grand Piece Online with a fucking Rezero like paint slab on it. But I just want to clarify real quick that I made Rezero a really, really, really long time ago. 2020, long ago. It's been 5 years. I feel like some of you were born in the year 2020, so it was a while ago. Now, this is a game idea that I've always picked up and I've put back down all the time. At heart, this is my #1 goal. So all the practicing I've done is to do this. I promised people a long time ago on my Discord server when I originally cancelled Rezero that, guys, I will come back to it when I'm good enough to actually do it. And I feel like I'm slightly better at making games now. Maybe just like a tiny bit. Also, let me just dispel a quick rumor. Just because I made the game years and years and years ago, that does not mean I have years and years and years worth of progress on the game. Actually, it means quite the opposite. It means that the stuff I made was so outdated and so bad that I can't use any of it. But that's fine. I guess we'll just have to start from step 1. No, from 0.
Oh, you've got an ass on you, all right. See, that's what he's talking about. Spread your ass open, dude.
I'll say it time and time again, all good games start in the planning phase. A Trello board is always a great way to see where your game's going and just kind of figure out what your first ideas are for it. I've skipped a little bit of what I've done, because obviously you've just seen the logo, so I don't need to show you how I made it. Now, I had made 2 tracksuits before this, but I decided both of them just weren't very great, so this is my 3rd time making a Subaru tracksuit for this project. So because I'm only making the torso here, this gives me a really good opportunity to finally show you what it takes for me to make a game-ready model. So first off, I block out the rough shape. I then adjust it to the reference. And then once I finish that, I actually do a second adjustment towards a Roblox character-y art style. Because considering Roblox characters are made out of cubes and stuff, I just don't like to do their clothes in the same way you would a normal person. I feel the need to give them a more flat or anime-styled clothing. And then I do a process called UV unwrapping, which basically assigns the 3D faces towards a 2D plane, allowing you to add textures and color to them. My UV unwrapping skills are kind of crap as well, I'm aware of that, but at the end of the day it gets the job done, so keep that in mind if you ever decide to make a game. Perfection isn't everything, man. You can get away with some mistakes. Once I've finished UV unwrapping, I take it into Substance Painter, Here is where most of the adjustments happen, and I think where most of the time gets taken depending on what kind of model it is. There are multiple different ways to texture your models, and quite often I'll go for a material-based approach, but for Rezero, I really love the art styles of the novels. I think the anime is also really nice too, so I want to keep it extra close to those. I don't want to go into the more realistic look that other games such as like Holy War X and like Rel C's do. They go for this like definitely closer to more realism than anime. And I think just for Rezero in particular, I'd really like to see more line work. But you can see it's starting to take shape. And then for the shading, I went for this really kind of strange style. A lot of people told me to go to the more like blended one, where it's a lot, softer shadows or more painterly shadows. But I decided to go for the hard shadows that you see on 2D Roblox clothing. I'll come back and finish the arms and legs later, but that's how you make clothing for Rezero. Next up, I want to start working on an environmental art document, which is basically just pulling together a bunch of assets, which is how I'm going to figure out how the game looks without making the entire game world. So in this process, I'm going to be making a bunch of plants and rocks, which we'll eventually be using to make a tiny scene to get the general gist of how the game's going to look graphically. This is mostly used for map design, and it's going to make it really easy in the future for me to know what my map is going to look like without having to build a giant space of land. And everything here went through a few iterations. I'll definitely probably go back and remake these rocks and such later, but this is the general vibe I want for the Rezero open world. And this test scene is crucial for figuring out the graphics of the entire game. And since we're on the topic of graphics, let's build some buildings. Now, picking a first building to make is quite a hard decision because most people are going to start with houses, and that's the most common thing you're going to see, but I decided to go a little bit of a different route because I was really burnt out from altercations at the time, so I wanted to build something new and different compared to a house. So I decided to take up the Lookout from episode 18, a very famous episode. I mean, come on guys. I make a joke about it every like 5 seconds. But this area is quite a detailed, in-depth location, which people are going to recognize the second they go there. So it's really challenging me to make something that people instantly recognize is the place from Rezero. And yeah, I'll probably go back and remake this later like I do with pretty much everything, but I really enjoyed the process of building this and had to rewatch the episode quite a lot, which is never really a bad thing. That's the good thing about making Rezero, is I have to go back and rewatch Rezero pretty much every day, and the more chances I get to watch the show, the better. Although I did get like the tiniest bit slothful at the end, and just built the tops of these pillars out of previously made blocks, instead of the really detailed column tops that they are in the anime. Again, probably why I'm going to go back and remake this, but my slothfulness will be punished one day. Next up is the main road tower. And this is another crucial set piece, which is one of a kind. You'll see it in most episodes that take place in the city of Lagunica. It's kind of a centerpiece to the city, I guess, so giving it a good shot is really important. Now, I probably will go back and change this a lot later, but I think for the result I'm getting at the moment, it's fine, and probably might not even be changed, because I think it looks really good by the end of it. Now, to save myself some time on making new objects in Blender, I did reuse the block quite a lot, and for unique objects that needed to be made separately, I made them slightly different from the reference piece, so that if a player was to somehow get up there, which probably won't be too difficult in the game, the geometry for standing up there won't be like completely fucked up, because Blender's collisions really just, they don't work in Roblox, man. Now, the main centerpiece of the tower is this little symbol in the middle. It's like some metal symbol with a red gem in the middle, and you see it quite a lot around the show, whether it be on their banners and such. So I felt like it wouldn't be a waste of time to make a pretty detailed version that I can slap onto most buildings. And this symbol's probably going to get reused in a lot of places, so I made sure to put some effort into it and gave it a good shot. And I'm happy with how it turned out. I think the entire tower looks great. The geometry is good enough that you can actually walk through the little side gaps. So if you somehow get up there, or if I don't know, add a ladder or something, a player could genuinely hide up there. And that's something I'm thinking about quite often when building these things, is like, hey, what if a player got up there and did some stuff up there? Even if the place isn't meant to be accessible or isn't expected to be accessible. So when you eventually play the game in the year 2781, try your hardest to go to places which you just wouldn't expect to usually be able to go, because I'll try my hardest to make it a reasonable place that you can actually play on. Now, eventually the time does come where you need to build some houses, and I dread it. Houses are just like not my thing, but the goal here was not necessarily to have the final house of the map, but get just the idea for how the houses will look. So here you can see me putting together some houses, and it's mostly just me dissecting how I feel about the house, and then building another one to change what I didn't like about the old one. And I tried some really weird styles here, but while building, I felt like the Roblox textures really just weren't doing it for me, and that the custom ones that I could find online just weren't good enough. So I came to the conclusion that I should get Substance Designer, Adobe Substance Designer. This thing, and it lets you make your own textures using a bunch of nodes. And I suck at the Blender node graph editor, but this one was a little easier to comprehend for some reason, so I picked it up pretty quick. The textures I started making in the beginning were like pretty ass, I'm gonna be honest, but by texture 3 or 4, I really started getting the hang of it and started being able to incorporate it into my builds. They're still not the greatest, but the good thing about this is that I can just go and make a new one and import it over whenever I feel like, and it will replace every texture in the world with the new one I make. So I can get away with having bad textures here. It's not like I have to rebuild the buildings if I have bad textures. And yeah, I went through like buildings made of basic cubes to these more hand textured ones where I was trying to be exactly the same as the anime, to these ones with weird smooth edges that just never shaded correctly. I even tried some cartoon shading techniques, but again, they didn't look very good either. In the end though, I did settle down on this like hybrid, I guess. These are mesh parts that still kind of look like blocks, but they have enough curvature and like difference in shape that they're not blocks, and they look a little nicer, just maybe slightly. I know that most people that play the game that do not see this video, or do not pay attention at this part, probably won't notice this, but that's the part that a lot of aspiring game developers don't understand, is that 90% of the work you do just isn't going to be noticed by the player base. People just see buildings, they're not going to see every little vertice you pulled or window you placed. They're just going to see, hey, that's a house, and probably walk past it and never pay attention to it. And that's just a reality you gotta accept. I also quickly scripted a day-night cycle and some night reactive windows, which the code for this is awful, but it's there to give me a general vibe of how I want the game to look like at nighttime as well, because I'd say it's a pretty important thing to think about. And this turned out really well. So I'm happy with the quality of the buildings now. I'm gonna go back to the Subaru tracksuit and finish the arms and legs. And the explanation for the arms and legs is exactly the same as the torso, pretty much. Maybe minor differences here and there for stylistic choice or something, but it's not that interesting. These models are actually pretty bad, and they're really carried by the textures I put on them, but who knows, maybe I'll make a better one at some point in the future. I don't know, man. I don't know, bro. I can't promise nothing. So it turns out my lighting was a little off. When I put the tracksuit into Roblox, the orange parts seemed more yellow, because I think I was turning the brightness too high or making the overall color correction of the world too blue. If you understand anything about color wheels, if you make the world more blue, it's going to bring all the colors up towards it, so orange becomes yellow. So all I did was change how the coloring looks, and that's messed up pretty much every building I've built before it, changing the color palettes and stuff, but I actually kind of like what it did to a lot of them, so we're chilling. But in the future, I will build a system that changes the lighting based on weather and time of day, so that Rezero looks good at all times. And now the bit you've been waiting for, or the bit that pretty much everyone skipped towards, the combat system. You love combat, everyone loves combat. Quite frankly, I make the best combat. And now this is where it gets complicated. Now I love the parry combat from Deep Woken. I'm sorry guys, I think it's good. The problem is, Deep Woken's combat can sometimes be janky or inconsistent. I mean, it was made a long time ago, mostly for a CC community, and to be fair, when you make a closed community game, you don't really have to put too much effort into things looking polished, because closed community players are a lot more tolerant of the game being worse for some reason. I'm not really sure why, but they just are, they feel exclusive. So all my plan is to take Deep Woken's combat system, remove some of the jank, and try to lower the skill floor, so that players that would be so bad they can't even play the game in Deep Woken can actually have a chance in Rezero. It's a hard thing to describe, so I won't go into it, but you'll see. I just want to make the beginning of the game a little easier. But that doesn't mean the overall experience, as in like endgame content or PvP, will be any easier there. It just means I am making the entry for the game more simple. But at heart, Rezero is going to be a parry game, and to achieve that, we're going to have to make the weapon system, and overall base combat. So all I've done is make a set of animations for a weapon, and make a parry effect, which I actually found from old Rezero files, and it wasn't that bad. So officially, this is the only asset being reused from the old game. But make a sequencer so it changes which punch you're doing, and add the functionalities for a feint, and there you go, you've got parry combat. It really isn't that difficult. The hardest part about parry combat, in my opinion, is the fine-tuning. Figuring out exactly how fast an M1 should be to keep it fair and reactable, while getting the range of M1s correct, getting the walk speed correct, figuring out how long the parry window should be open for, the dodge window should be open for, all of it. This was the most complicated part. I then added a posture mechanic, which I'm calling stability, which effectively works like block health. Then I added a small animation that will show people if you're attempting to parry, and during this time I remade the fist animations a bunch, making it look closer to Deep Woken. Because they already found the method to a good parry game, I'm just gonna not fix what isn't broken. The animations are pretty basic, but I think for a parry game you kinda need basic animations or else it's very unreadable. And by the time I was done, I had a parry system that was basically the same as Deep Woken. Although currently more on the basic end, I think it definitely has potential where it stands, and with additions like criticals, aerial M1s, and eventually moves in the future, I think it's really going somewhere. You can see from the background footage that I actually added health bars and a posture bar above the enemy's head. This is mostly for testing reasons, but I was thinking I might actually leave this in the game, because it's a really different feeling knowing how much health the enemy has and how good their posture is. Sometimes without this information in Deep Woken, I'm confused as to why the enemy won or lost, but with it directly above their head, I get the exact reason why they're losing or winning, which helps me as a player actually kind of know that I'm doing something. Parry games like Deep Woken, Type Soul, Tokyo Re, or whatever often suffer from confusing deaths, thinking that you should have won when the enemy would actually be half health. You can't truly gauge how well you're doing against someone when it doesn't show the health bar, so I'm going to go in a different direction to these parry games, and I'm going to give people health bars. I'm not afraid to change how parry games work, and I'm willing to make weird changes like this to try and get to a better game. Now you'll notice that the current HUD is just a bunch of numbers, and that's not going to do. Maybe for testing, yeah, sure, but I really enjoy making HUDs. If you've watched any game dev video, I really like making HUDs. I am a HUD fanatic, UI fanatic. So I instantly loaded into Photoshop and started experimenting with different UIs. I started off with this really basic one that was disgusting in all honesty, and I don't know why I even went for it. And while experimenting, I'd do like random little drawings, like you can see on the stamina bar here, I drew the episode. But eventually I brought it towards a more Lagunica themed UI, which is just golden royal looking shit. I don't really know how else to explain it. And I'm changing the order of some UIs compared to most other parry games, so that one, the posture bar is actually bigger than the stamina bar, because I think it's more important in Rezero than the stamina, and also that it's not at the top of the health bar, because I believe the top is for the most important stuff, which will eventually be the crucial cooldowns, and health bar, because, I mean, if your health bar reaches 0, you lose, right? So it's super important that you know how much you've got. In the end, it turned out exactly as I imagined it would be in my head, and after finally designing that part, I went straight ahead to an inventory, which again is heavily inspired by Deep Woken. I'm sure you're seeing a pattern here, but I'm trying to move around some of the UI elements. There's something I feel more comfortable with, and eventually I'll add more elements to this UI, which allows you to sort them by rarity or sort them by, I don't know, defense numbers or something. But for now, because there's no inventory and item system coded, it's just kind of the UI. But I'm happy with how it turned out, just like everything else I've made so far, and I feel that Rezero has got a future ahead of it. So if you agree with me, please like the video, subscribe, send a comment. My Discord's down below, you can join it. It's the #1 place to get Rezero news, or news of my uploads. There's also other people there that like my videos too. So you'll probably find someone you can talk to about this kind of stuff, if you're struggling to find someone already. But if you're an aspiring game developer and you think my Discord is the place to go to learn how to make games or find someone to help you make a video game, then I'm going to be honest, it's probably not the best place for that. And asking me to work for your game or give you advice also is probably not a very good idea, because again, I'm a solo dev and I do most of the stuff by myself. Everything made in this video or for Rezero so far has been completely done by me, and it will probably remain that way. But yeah, this is Bizaah. Thank you for watching my devlog. Episode 2 for this series will probably have the inventory and item system, and adding abilities and improving on the combat system. Potentially a little bit of building and modeling here and there, but I wouldn't say it'd be as much as this video, although I cannot promise anything. When this video comes out, the amount of work on the game is only like a week ahead of what you're seeing on this video, and these videos take around 2 to 3 months to record, maybe 4. I said last video I'd be back in a month, and I wasn't back in a month. So see you all, and from now on, Rezero is mentioned as the RelC's killer. Thank you. And if someone ever asks you what Rezero is, tell them that the team is bulletproof, it is the most expensive game on Roblox ever made, and big things are coming.